You didn't just react. You handed someone a weapon and stood still while they used it against you. You know the moment. Not an abstract moment. Your moment. The room had people in it. People who watch. People who remember. Your manager said something. Maybe it was a tone. Maybe it was a public correction in front of the team. Maybe it was a dismissal so casual it felt like you didn't exist. And something moved in your chest. Fast. Hot. And before the rational part of your brain could reach the brake, your mouth was already moving. Your voice already carried an edge. Maybe you pushed back. Maybe you said something you couldn't unsay. Maybe you just went red, and everyone watched it happen on your face like a headline. And they saw it. All of them. That moment didn't end when you left the room. It followed you home. You replayed it in the shower, on the drive back, at 2 a.m. when you should have been asleep. Not because you lost the argument, because you lost something worse. You lost the image they had of you as someone who couldn't be rattled. And the worst part is that the person who provoked you didn't lose anything. They went home fine. They slept fine. You were the one still bleeding. That is what a reaction costs. Not the moment. The aftermath. The way the room recalibrates its understanding of who you are. The way your manager now knows, not thinks, knows, that there is a lever inside you that anyone can pull. The way a colleague files it away quietly. The way they will reference that moment 6 months from now when they need leverage. You gave them the blueprint. You showed them exactly where to press. Here is the truth that no one frames correctly. Reacting is not a failure of composure. It is a transfer of ownership. The second your face changed, the second your voice shifted, the moment that heat reached the surface, you were no longer running your own psychology. Someone else was. A person you probably don't even respect was sitting in the driver's seat of your nervous system, steering you wherever they chose. You were not a man having a bad moment. You were a machine executing code that someone else wrote in real time. And here is what that cost you beyond the moment itself. Here is what that machine looked like to every person in that room. Not passionate, not principled, predictable. They now know your code. They know if they use the right tone, in the right setting, in front of the right audience, you will execute. Every time. Without fail. You became, in that moment, the easiest person in that room to control. The anger felt justified. It always does. It arrives dressed as principle. This is you refusing to be treated like nothing. This is what a man with standards looks like. That feeling is the trap. Because the man with real standards doesn't need to display them. He doesn't perform strength. He doesn't audition dominance. The men who have truly mastered this don't just stay silent in those moments. They look different in those moments. Still, unhurried. Like the situation isn't even registering as a threat. Not because they said something devastating in return, but because their complete absence of reaction communicated something that no comeback ever could. That you cannot be reached. There is a difference between a man who says nothing because he has nothing and a man who says nothing because he has already decided how this ends. One of them is afraid. The other one is calculating. The room cannot tell them apart by looking. Not immediately. But over time, over the accumulation of moments, the difference becomes the most important thing about you in that building. The most dangerous lie you were ever told wasn't told to you by an enemy. It was told to you by your own body. Anger feels like clarity. That is the problem. The moment it arrives, that heat, that sharpening of focus, that sudden certainty that you are right and they are wrong. It does not feel like weakness. It feels like the opposite. It feels like you finally stopped tolerating something you should have stopped tolerating a long time ago. It feels like a man drawing a line. And that feeling is so convincing, so physically immediate, that questioning it feels like questioning your own instincts, like betraying yourself. That feeling is a biological costume. Underneath it is something far less flattering. The moment your face changed, every person in that room stopped evaluating whether you were wronged. They stopped caring about that entirely. What they are calculating now is stability. Specifically, how stable is this person under pressure? Because in a professional hierarchy, stability reads as competence. Volatility reads as liability. The original injustice disappears. The grievance you had, the real one, the legitimate one, evaporates. Because the story is no longer about what they did. The story is now about what you did next. You took a situation where you held the moral ground, and you vacated it in 4 seconds. You did their work for them. And here is what nobody in this genre will say to you directly. The men who run these provocations, the managers who have done this to 10 people before you, the colleagues who have been pulling this lever since they were teenagers, they are not reacting to you. They are executing a strategy they have run before and watched work before. They know what a public dismissal does to a man who has not yet separated his sense of self from his professional position. They know the heat will come up. They know the voice will carry an edge. They know the room will see it. Your reaction was not a consequence of their provocation. It was the product they were manufacturing. Now think about what it actually takes for that product to be manufactured. Something has to land. The provocation has to connect with something inside you that isn't settled. It has to find a surface. Because a man who has no open question about his position, who is not seeking the room's confirmation of his value, who does not need his manager's acknowledgement to know where he stands, that man cannot be provoked in that particular way, not because he is suppressing the reaction, because the provocation has no surface to grip. It arrives, finds nothing to catch on, and slides. Your anger is not proof that you have standards. It is proof that someone found the gap. One sentence, delivered in the right tone, in front of the right audience, and they walked straight to the unresolved question inside you and pressed it. The unresolved question is never about them. It is always some version of the same thing. Am I actually as solid as I present myself to be? And the fact that their move worked, the fact that it landed hard enough to produce a visible reaction, gave everyone in the room the same answer at the same time. This is why the men most easily provoked are not the men with the highest standards. They are the men with the most to prove. The person who reacts fastest to a slight is almost always the person whose position feels most precarious to them internally, regardless of what their title says. The person who says nothing, who lets the provocation hang unanswered, who returns to the subject at hand without apparent effort. That person is not more patient. They are more settled. The question then is not how to manage the reaction when it arrives. That is too late. The question is, what is still unresolved inside you that keeps making the gap available? Because until that question is closed, not managed, not suppressed, closed, anyone with the right tone and the right timing can walk into any room you are in and open it again. The only variable that changes is you. Specifically, whether the gap is still there. You stayed quiet, and somehow it made things worse. You made the decision. You felt the heat arrive, you recognized the trap, and you chose not to step into it. You said nothing. You kept your face neutral. You let the comment hang in the air between you. And then you watched something happen that nobody warned you about. They pushed harder. The room shifted. A colleague read your silence as concession. Your manager repeated the point with more confidence, louder this time, because your stillness told him the ground beneath him was solid. And somewhere in the back of your mind a voice said, maybe reacting would have been better. Maybe silence is just submission with better posture. That voice is wrong, but it is asking the right question. There are two kinds of silence, and from the outside, in the short term, they are completely indistinguishable. The first is the silence of a man who has nothing, who swallowed the reaction not because he is above it, but because he is afraid of what happens if he doesn't. That silence has a texture. It is tight. The jaw is slightly set. The eyes move. The body is still. But it is the stillness of something held down, not something settled. People feel that. They cannot name it, but they feel it. And they read it correctly as suppression. As a man white-knuckling his composure. And white-knuckled composure is not power. It is just delayed reaction. They know if they keep pressing, eventually the hand opens. The second silence is different at the cellular level. It is the stillness of a man who has genuinely processed the situation and found it beneath a response. Not decided, it is beneath a response. Found it there, naturally, the way you find a room quiet when there is simply nothing making noise. His eyes don't move defensively. His jaw isn't set. His body doesn't carry the signature of something being managed. He looks at the person speaking with a quality of attention that is almost clinical, not hostile, not indifferent, observational. Like a man watching something predictable unfold exactly as he expected. That quality, that specific texture of stillness, does not read as weakness. It reads as the most unsettling thing a room can encounter. A man who cannot be reached. But here is why your silence failed you in that moment at work. Because silence without status is invisible. And status in a professional environment is not assigned by title. It is accumulated through a pattern of behavior over time. The man whose silence commands a room didn't earn that in one moment of not reacting. He earned it through 20 previous moments where his stillness was followed by something precise. A decision that proved correct. An observation that reframed the room. A response so measured and so accurate that people began to unconsciously calibrate their behavior around his presence. Silence is not a weapon you deploy once. It is a reputation you build slowly. And until that reputation exists, silence alone will be misread. Not because the people around you are perceptive, but because human beings default to the simplest available interpretation. And the simplest interpretation of a man who says nothing when attacked is that he had nothing to say. So what do you do in the room right now, before the reputation is built? You do not stay silent. You respond. But the response is not a reaction. A reaction is produced by the emotion. It arrives before the thought. A response is produced by a decision. It arrives after a beat that is almost imperceptible but felt by everyone in the room. That beat is the gap between the stimulus and your answer. And in that gap, however small, the room understands that you are choosing. not scrambling, choosing. The response itself almost doesn't matter as much as that beat. Sometimes, what follows, it is a single sentence. Sometimes, a question that reframes the entire exchange. Your manager dismissed you in front of the team. You felt it land. You took the beat. You looked at him with the expression of a man who has just been told something mildly interesting. And you said, quietly, without performance, "We can revisit that." And you moved on. 3 words. No edge. No explanation. No defense. Now he doesn't know where he stands with you. That uncertainty, that small unresolved question you just planted in his mind, is worth more than any comeback you could have delivered. Silence, used correctly, is not the absence of power. It is power that gives them nothing to push against. That is precisely what makes it dangerous. Your body betrayed you before you said a single word. The flush that moved up your neck, the slight acceleration in your breathing, the almost imperceptible tightening around your eyes. You felt it happening, and you could not stop it because you were trying to manage it with your mind while your body was already 3 steps ahead, running a program that was written into your nervous system 40,000 years before you were born. The mind is slow, the body is fast, and in the gap between them, everyone in that room saw everything they needed to see. This is not a character flaw, it is engineering. When the brain perceives a threat, social, physical, psychological, it does not distinguish. The amygdala fires before the conscious mind registers what is happening. Cortisol and adrenaline flood the bloodstream in under 2 seconds. Heart rate climbs. The muscles in your face and neck contract. Your voice changes pitch, even when you are trying to control it. All of this happens before you have made a single conscious decision. You are not reacting. Your body is reacting and dragging you with it. And the people who provoke you for a living, the managers who have done this to 10 men before you, the colleagues who have been running this particular game since they were teenagers, they are not reading your words. They are reading your body. They watched your neck. They clocked the breath. They saw the jaw. And in that moment, they got their answer. Everything that comes out of your mouth after that is just noise, because the real communication already happened and you lost it without speaking. So the question is not how to think your way out of the physiological response. You cannot think your way out of a biological event any more than you can think your way out of a fever. The question is how to physically override the body's program while it is running, not suppress it, override it. The vagus nerve runs from the brainstem down through the chest and into the abdomen. It is the primary conductor of the parasympathetic nervous system, the system responsible for pulling the body out of threat response and back into calm, calculated function. It can be activated deliberately, in real time, completely invisible to anyone watching. 2 sharp inhales through the nose, not 1, 2, stacked, filling the lungs entirely, followed by a single, long, slow exhale through the mouth that lasts twice as long as both inhales combined. This specific pattern offloads carbon dioxide from the blood, directly slows the heart rate, and activates the vagus nerve within seconds, not minutes. Seconds. You do this while they are still talking, while they are delivering the provocation. And here is what they actually see. Nothing. Your face has not changed. Your breathing is not visible because the inhales are controlled and quiet. But internally your heart rate is dropping. Your cortisol is being actively counteracted. Your prefrontal cortex is coming back online. You are rebuilding your own capacity for strategy in real time while they watch and see only stillness. And then something else happens. something that operates beneath language entirely. As your physiological state drops, as your breathing slows, your blink rate decreases, your facial muscles go slack, the person across from you begins to feel something they did not anticipate: unease. Because the human nervous system is a detection instrument, we are constantly, unconsciously, reading the physiological state of the people around us. And what your body is now broadcasting, this slowing, this absolute absence of threat response, does not compute for them. They escalated. You decelerated. They pushed. You settled. Their primitive brain is now receiving a signal it was not prepared for. As they get louder, you get slower. Your posture relaxes. Your facial muscles go entirely slack. And the room, the colleagues, the onlookers, the people filing this moment away for later, feels the shift. Not because of what you said, because of what your body communicated before you said anything. You made them perform alone. You turned their aggression into a solo act. And there is nothing more exposing than performing in front of an audience that isn't reacting. But here is what nobody tells you about mastering the body. It is the easier half. The physiological response can be trained. It responds to repetition, to deliberate conditioning. The body is a system, and systems can be reprogrammed. What is harder, what sits underneath all of this and determines whether any of it holds under real pressure, is the system that decides what counts as a threat in the first place. That system was running long before you had a name for it. It was written long before you had any say in its construction. And until you understand exactly what it is running on, every tool in this video is a patch over a problem that keeps regenerating itself. You are not an emotional person. You are a poorly calibrated one. There is a significant difference. Emotional means the reactions are yours, built-in, intrinsic, an expression of who you are at the core. Poorly calibrated means the reactions are outputs of a system running on bad data. Data that was written into the system under specific conditions, in a specific context, that no longer exists. The system does not know that. It is still running the old code, still firing the old responses, still treating a dismissive manager in a Monday morning meeting as though the stakes are identical to the situation that originally wrote that response into you. They are not. But the system cannot tell the difference. It only knows the pattern. Perceived threat to position, react. Perceived dismissal from authority, defend. Perceived disrespect in front of witnesses, escalate. The code runs, you follow it, and you call it your personality. It is not your personality, it is your defaults, and defaults can be rewritten. Here is what the rewrite actually requires. Not meditation, not journaling. What it requires is the same thing that any system debug requires. You have to identify exactly where the bad data entered, what condition it was written under, and what false conclusion it encoded as permanent truth. Not to process it emotionally, to locate it precisely, examine it coldly, and update the output. Was genuinely under threat, real threat. A situation where the disapproval of a specific authority actually did determine the quality of your life, where being dismissed actually did carry consequences you could not absorb, where reacting, defending, escalating, performing strength was a functional response to a real set of stakes. The system learned that lesson correctly. At that time, in that context, the code was right. The context changed. The code didn't. So now your manager uses a particular tone, and something fires that was written for an entirely different room, an entirely different authority, an entirely different set of consequences. The output is the same. The stakes are not. You are running a threat response calibrated for a situation that no longer exists, in a room where staying still costs essentially nothing. Your job is to interrupt the execution long enough to run the current data instead of the old data. This is what the gap is actually for. Not composure, not the performance of calm. The gap is a processing window, a forced pause between the pattern match and the execution where you insert one question. Does the old code apply here? Or am I running a response that was written for a room I am no longer in? That question, asked with genuine analytical precision, produces a different output almost every time. Because almost every time the honest answer is no. The stakes are not what the system is reporting. The threat is not structural. At first, this interruption is manual, effortful. You feel the code begin to execute, the heat start its ascent, and you have to consciously force the processing window open before the output fires. It requires focus that is difficult to maintain in a room with an audience and a provocateur watching your face. But automation is faster than intention, only initially. The first sign the rewrite is working is not that you stop feeling the trigger. It is that you feel it later. The heat arrives half a second after it used to, then a full second. Then there is a beat before it that didn't exist, a moment of observation that precedes the physical response. That beat is the new pathway establishing itself. That beat is the gap widening without effort. When you notice it for the first time, in a real room, under real pressure, you will understand something that cannot be explained before you experience it. The system is no longer running you. You are running the system. But there is a secondary effect nobody mentions because it is uncomfortable to describe. When the old code stops executing, when the automated responses go quiet, what remains is not calm. It is a specific, unsettling silence that most men have never sat inside, because the noise of the old system was filling it continuously. And in that silence, something becomes audible that the noise was covering. Not a revelation, a question. The one question that the anger, the reacting, the defending, the rehearsing comebacks at 2 a.m., all of it was keeping just far enough away to remain unasked. Not what they think of you, what you have actually built. Whether the life you are defending so instinctively in those rooms is one you chose or one you defaulted into. Whether the position you are protecting is one you actually want. That question does not arrive gently, and it cannot be reacted away. There is a man you have seen exactly once, maybe in a boardroom, maybe in a confrontation in a corridor that you happened to walk past, maybe at a table where someone took a clear, deliberate shot at him in front of witnesses. You remember it because of what didn't happen. The shot landed. You saw it land. The words were precise enough. The timing was right. The audience was there. Everything the provocateur needed was in place. And the man looked at the person who delivered it with an expression that you have been trying to find the right word for ever since. Not contempt. Not amusement. Something quieter than both. The expression of a man who has just been shown a card trick he recognized before the magician's hand moved. A mild, unhurried attention. The kind of attention you give something that does not require a decision. He let the silence sit for a beat that was 1 second too long to be accidental. And then he said something. Not a comeback, not a deflection. Something so unremarkable and so precisely redirecting that the moment simply closed. No debris. No aftermath. The conversation moved on, and the person who delivered the shot was left holding it, alone, with nowhere to put it. You watched that and felt something you did not immediately recognize. Not admiration exactly. Something with more unease in it than admiration. The specific discomfort of watching someone operate from a place you have not been to yet. That is not a personality type. It is not charisma. What you witnessed was the complete absence of the question. The man was not asking himself how to handle the situation. He was not managing his response, or calculating his next move, or monitoring the room's reaction to his reaction. Was not suppressed, not disciplined into silence, genuinely offline. Because the data that feeds that machinery, the open question about his own position, the need for the room's confirmation, the gap that a well-aimed provocation can find and press, had been closed, debugged, removed from the system. That is the endpoint, not a skill, a condition. And here is what that condition produces in a room. The colleagues who are running their tests quietly recalibrate. The manager who used the public dismissal as a standard tool finds that the tool no longer produces the expected output and stops reaching for it. The provocateurs redirect toward easier targets. Not because you frightened them, because you stopped being a source. Because what they are feeding on is reaction, and you have simply, unremarkably, ceased to produce it. You become harder to manage. Not because you are difficult, because you are opaque. Because the lever that everyone else in that room can be moved with does not appear to exist in you. And people who cannot find your lever do not push you. They account for you differently. You move from a known variable to an unknown one. And unknown variables are handled with more precision than known ones. This is what changes in the room. Not their affection for you, their calculation of you. The Tuesday it first happens. The ordinary meeting, the comment that was designed to land, and the internal observation that it didn't. You will not feel triumphant. There is no moment of victory, no scene where the room shifts in your favor and the provocateur is visibly diminished. It is quieter and stranger than that. You will notice the comment. You will recognize what it was built to do. You will feel the place where the heat used to arrive and find it cooler than expected. And the system will run the current data, find no threat, and produce no output, automatically. For the first time without effort. Not because you decided to, not because you remembered the technique or forced the gap open, because the rewrite completed itself. The man across the table waits for what comes next. You look back down at what you were working on.